Hello, welcome to another episode of Doubl3Tap. Today we are joined by Jeremy Horn, COO of Xterio, who are currently building out their flagship project, Overworld. Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
Hey, Jackal. Hey, Alex. Good, good. It's busy times for us. There's a saying that I love, which is, that events tend to attack you in packs, right? They're never alone, and um, all at the same time at Xterio, we're preparing to launch one game next year. Overworld is minting in December. Our marketplace is gaining a ton of traction. We had a massive free mint with AOF this morning. It's just like all of a sudden I have to do, what should be multiple months of work in like a matter of weeks. But it's part of the fun of being an entrepreneur.
Slowly, then all at once, right?
Exactly. All at once, yeah.
Cool. Well, we like to ask everyone what you currently playing at the moment.
A great question. I'm playing Alan Wake 2 on PlayStation. Nice. Yeah, I love horror. The game was just so creative and so different. Came out 13 years ago, I believe, over a decade, and finally continuing the story. It feels really good.
Did you play Control at all?
I did. Really, I liked it a lot. Totally different vibe, right? It's much more like action oriented, less of a Twin Peaks like investigation horror. But I mean, those Finnish folks at Remedy, they do some good stuff.
I feel like they've really found their niche with those types of games where it's like somewhat experimental, but it's still kind of like that, as you said, kind of detective action adventure type of gameplay with this like interesting interwoven narrative that you don't really find across other types.
No. It's definitely a bit of a niche in a way.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll get right into it. So, people see you kind of all over crypto Twitter, very active in the Twitter spaces, very active talking about Xterio, talking about other projects, kind of lifting the entire space up. One of the things that we're kind of uniquely familiar with is just how difficult discovery is, right, in Web3 gaming. And a lot of people go to Twitter initially, and this is something you talked about, where you might be able to find those kind of brand ambassadors on Twitter, but once you start to scale, Twitter may not be the best platform for you. So we've seen some other publishers step into the space, notably a handful out of Korea. We're curious, what sort of publishing problems do you see maybe with incumbents in the Web2, Web3 space that Xterio is hoping to solve?
Yeah, it really comes down to the thesis and the reason why we built Xterio, right? So I come from 12 years of free-to-play, been a game maker for 15. And I've seen free-to-play evolve from being this like nascent, gold rush, Wild West business in the early days. I started when it was the iPhone 2. And I've seen that entire space mature, right? And it went from being a small studio in the Bay Area, kind of like growing, making games, in 6 months, CPI under $1. You were making $3 after like 3 months. And then it was just like gravy on top, and you could just like kind of like rapid scale, right? And I saw the entire space move into, a mature market, right? A lot of consolidation. Now, all of those small studios back in the day have been acquired, right? You can't name small free-to-play studios in the United States that have any sort of like reach, right? They've been acquired by the Jam Cities, the Scopely's, the Activisions of the world. And so competition became extremely, extremely hard. Discoverability became really poor because of Apple changes to the featuring system and how they highlight new games. CPI became extremely expensive. And kind of the death knell of free-to-play has really been the move to more strict privacy rules from Apple and Google through the IDFA deprecation. And it's going to get even worse when they completely ban fingerprinting, right? There was still some hacks you could put together to fingerprint users and try to track them, but they're really cracking down on that. And so after 12 years, I like to say, I became pretty bored of working in free-to-play because it became such a grind, just incredibly hard to scale. And when you have games that cost, $15, $20 million plus a license that you pay to Disney or Marvel or Star Wars, like risks became very, very problematic, and all companies became risk averse. And so it really became a paint by the numbers type of game with very little innovation. Right? I mean, early days of free to play, immense amount of innovation as new touch inputs, gameplays, but also when the 3G, 4G, 5G came out, we saw like increase in the ability to maintain multiplayer sessions. And so the entire reason why we got into Web3, me and Michael Tong, my co-founder, who's the ex-COO of NetEase and a big shot, was really around trying to find solution to endemic problems of free-to-play, right? It's like the absolute impossibility of scaling titles. Right? When you think about the last year, outside of MiHoYo being able to outspend you, not only in terms of revenue of spending, but also in terms of manpower, right? Because Chinese labor force works incredibly hard, and they spend like 100 million or more on those projects. Outside of MiHoYo and outside of Scopely hitting a freaking like lightning in a bottle with Monopoly Go, you can't name one single game that has scaled in the past year. Just none. It really is frightening, at least in the West. And so our thesis was like, what can we do to go back to growth in free-to-play, right? And there's not a ton of levers, but what we've discovered very early on was the concept of digital ownership impacted positively retention and monetization. And I'm never, I've always said I'm not in Web3 because I'm a degen. I don't gamble with my money. I hate casinos. In Vegas, I spent $20 and I'm like, that was a waste. And when I buy an NFT, it's because I like the project. But all of my money is in a 401k and some like broad ETFs. That's about it. And so we wanted to improve those two metrics in order to go back to growth. Mobile is not yet ready for Web3 gaming, right? Or at least not the full scale of it. But when you see games like NFL Rivals, they've been steadily increasing in revenue, but also DAU, right? Which proves our point that you're able to see tremendous amount of improvements to KPIs through digital collectibles. And it makes sense, right? If I have something that I own in a game, I'll come back more frequently. Maybe I'll buy more assets because I hope that at some point, if the game is no longer to my liking, I can at least get some of that money back, right? Maybe make a profit if ever you were lucky, you get a gold card or whatever. But at least, you're not totally down on your money. You can just pass those assets to another player. I always compare it to, I still buy my games physically because I go back to GameStop to sell them, right? It's very silly. I'm like, I make very good money, but I'm like, nah, if I can sell 2 or 3 games and I get a new one, I'm like, it's a free game in my mind. And it's proven to be right in the digital space. And so that was our entire focus, and it remains our focus. And over time, we've integrated additional, vision points around AI, around scalability into our project. But what we're really trying to be is what we call next generation publisher, right? Is being able to take games that have this concept of digital ownership and allow them to scale via, guerrilla marketing type of deals on Twitter. And that's why I'm so active, is that I'm building my own brand and thus representing Xterio. As we all know, Twitter is very founder focused, right? The founder is the project. There's a high degree of symbiosis. But then it's providing ready-made tools. And we've got some big announcement on that around, chains, and we're chain agnostic, tokens, and we're also token agnostic through layer 0, custodial and non-custodial wallet. So we're able to give ready-made tools to those developers to implement, but then we're also leveraging, tools that we've acquired and that we brought it from other companies when it comes to live operations, right? So our goal is to build as many and distribute as many great games on mobile, but also on PC, and apply what we call reconciliation, which means that you can have a free-to-play version where there is no on-chain activity, and a PC version where there's all the on-chain activity, and we reconcile in the backend. So when the mobile player goes on his web browser, connects his profile, we're able to say, these are all the NFTs you had. You didn't even know you had those NFTs, and we don't even tell you those are NFTs. They're just cards and collectibles and weapons, and you can trade them with other players. So that was a little bit of a segued way of responding to your question.
And you mentioned this return to fundamental or to growth. So when you're thinking about returning to growth and identifying the levers, do the levers exist at kind of the Xterio publishing side? Do the levers exist for growth at the Web3 game side? I'm curious how you kind of break that down. I'm sure it probably crosses the chasm between the two, but
Yeah, it definitely crosses, right? Is we're focusing on those like Web 2.5 or Web 3 games because we think they have better fundamentals now than classic free to play, and we call those games free to play plus. They are not there to revolutionize the space; they're there to evolve it and make sure that there are games that are scalable. But then, the way we operate live operations in our games in development is really akin to what has been done and proven to be successful in Web 2, right? From optimization path of sales and onboarding and funnel and retention. So those two really work together, but we always try to identify the right moment where we're going to move someone from being a pure Web 2 player to being a Web 2.5 player. And that's really when we introduce the concept of digital ownership and hopes that they are going to become active on our marketplace as a trader. And I don't mean like as a trader of like speculator, purely interacting and trading items with other players. And that is going to extend the monetization of not only the game, but even at the asset level. A big problem free-to-play games have is content treadmills, right? You launch a character, it's consumed, you got to pump another one because there's no long tail to that revenue. You see the revenue over the 3 days, you run the gacha, and then that's about it. But if you have this like long tail concept of trading and royalties, then you're able to have a much more sustainable business model. And that's where we really bridge the gap between Web 2 live operations and data tracking and analysis and on-chain behaviors.
And when you're thinking about live ops, does live ops mean something somewhat differently from the Web3 publishing angle? So you mentioned, you guys have a handful of games coming out, right? That will be kind of launched, sequentially, and then you probably have other games, right? Not first party titles that will be on the platform. So how do you think about live ops from like the publisher perspective in terms of what Web3 might enable in, a little bit of this?
Yeah, it definitely, it's like there's a whole new playbook, right, that is being written on how do you live operate digital assets that are to some extent immutable. And I'm not a huge fan of 100% immutable. I believe the moment you introduce gaming, there needs to be a degree of like tunability within those assets. But you as the treasuries essentially, and what we recommend is for games to maintain a portion of the treasury of said NFTs within their own wallets, is the concept of dynamic pricing, right? Optimizing, essentially, optimizing the offers, making sure the spread is good, making sure that there's like volume and transaction that occur, and make sure that the items are priced correctly, right? You always need to maintain the right degree between like demand and supply, and that may mean, buying back some of your NFTs to burn them in case the supply was too big. And, now that your DAU has like shrunk, there's just too much available and that's no longer viable, or vice versa, adding liquidity into a market because, everybody is using or needs iron to craft a sword, but there's no more iron readily available. And you need to be able to supply that liquidity. It can't just be a absolutely fixed amount of supply that is in the market.
I want to look a bit deeper into some of the tools in the Web3 toolbox when it comes to go-to-market for early-stage games. It's obvious to anyone who knows you that you're a big advocate of social media marketing, micro-influencers, small and staggered collection drops, and generally this idea of like hopium or FOMO. But you've also said that FOMO is unsustainable. So I'm curious as to how you view the entire process from kind of initial conception and brand building, community building into the actual launch, and how these strategies change over that time period.
The reason why you start in Web3, in my mind, should never be around, the fallacy of scaling in Web3, right? It is a starting point, and it's a starting point that has a very broad, reach, despite being somewhat of a niche, right? You're able today to create brands digitally that are going to scale much more rapidly than if you are not in Web3. If you have a Web2 game, for example, and you're, a young team and the project is starting, the scalability is just not going to be there, right? The only scale that you can hit is if a VC, invests in you, and we know it's very difficult, especially right now. And then you're going to be facing, large behemoths in classic gaming. Web3 allows you, one, to grow extremely fast in terms of awareness. And I mean, Overworld proves it, right? We've been around the block for a while, but really our true marketing campaign is 6 weeks, right? And our project had kind of stopped marketing because the market was so poor. And we restarted 3 weeks ago, and now we're back in all-time high. So you're able to maximize awareness much faster. And admittedly, it's in a small group. But when you think about the impact, and it's not the NFT sales, because I have to remind people, it's hard for some people to hear it, but 2 to 3 million in NFT sales is it's poo-poo, right? It covers nothing of a game team. But having a proof of concept of your brand, of your positioning, of your company allows you to raise capital, especially in Asia, 100 times faster than if you do not, right? And especially when it comes to token sales, Asia has an immense appetite for it. Right now, I literally on a daily basis, I receive questions like, can we participate in the token pre-sale, right? We haven't even announced we're doing a token pre-sale. People are just assuming and saying, hey, I want to participate. I'm a big, Korean, Filipino, Japanese fund, and I want to buy tokens, right? And also in China, huge appetite despite regulation challenges. That opportunity at a time where VC capital is extremely thin and also scared, you do not have it outside of Web3. And so Web3 allows you to, one, tap into, liquidity by doing sales, allows you to launch a token, access additional liquidity, but then access bigger liquidity and capital from large VC that want to participate into that ecosystem, right? I mean, look at Memeland, right? Absolutely bonkers, right? There's just billions in market value. There is no way that scenario would have happened outside of Web3, right? And so while we're seeing the ebb and flow and the volatility of the crypto market, the opportunities, if you manage to position yourself right as a person, Ray Chan, me, whomever, a brand, like Memeland, there's not a product as far as I know. The product is the brand, right? But that created massive, massive success. And now it enables them to generate Memeland 2. What is going to be Memeland 2? I don't know, but now they have so much capital on their hand, they can create something absolutely, absolutely amazing, right? That goes beyond a PFP. And then the final kind of cherry on top is really that you're creating a core group of people, and I do mean it's pretty small, but evangelists who often have a pretty loud voice on social media and are going to enhance your message. A perfect example is Luca Netz with Pudgy Penguin, right? Born from Web3, and now has scaled rapidly into Web2 to the point where today they're on the front page of Walmart.com as a toy to buy for Christmas, which is, I mean, if you know anything about Walmart and their due diligence process and them listing on the main page, it's kudos to that team. But he was only able to do it because he created those mega fans who push the brand higher and higher, right? And every time they're doing something, even if it's just selling a little toy at 7-Eleven, they're gonna buy it en masse. And then what happens is that 7-Eleven looks at their sell sheets or whatever they call it and say, oh man, those little Pudgy Penguins, we had 10 in the store and they've sold out in 200 of those stores, right? And so they reorder, and the snowball just keeps on going. And that's only an opportunity you get in Web3, not in the normal physical world.
Yeah. To switch lanes a little bit, something else you've touched on quite a bit that I think by no means is exclusive to Web3, but has, for a number of different reasons, become like a go-to marketing model. And that's this idea of micro influencers. In traditional Web2 game publishing at this, or at least marketing, the power of content creators and influencers is becoming more and more kind of sought after. Like partnering with good quality content creators early on is a great marketing strategy. However, that's still in the realm of like, you want large vanity metrics for those influencers. This idea of micro influencers, on the other hand, I think is really interesting and has the opportunity to bridge over into like the gaming industry as a whole. How do you, what are the benefits of micro influencers in your opinion, and how does that play a role in the overall go-to-market?
Yeah. Let's talk about like I don't want to say issues with large, influencers, but those influencers, the ones that have like scaled to a massive, scale, be it in Web3 or Web2, they've all signed up with agencies, and those agencies just like rack their fees to numbers that are often just not worth it or nonsensical, right? And they still manage to get paid that amount because there's always, one person who like doesn't know any better. But it is so transactional where you pay through the nose, you get your 15 minutes, 20 minutes of exposure, and then that's done, right? Meanwhile, micro influencers are going to be much more collaborative. They're going to give you more of their time, and you can do it at like a much, much bigger scale, right? You can have a lot of more content. It's more important to be everywhere all the time than being big for 10 minutes is the way I always think about it. And so having this like blitzkrieg approach to marketing is paying off dividends, because the moment you're everywhere all the time, and it's true for Twitch as well, right? It's not just on Twitter. The moment you're so overwhelmingly present, the big players have no choice but to play your game or talk about it. And at that point, you haven't paid them anything, or they seek you out in order to find like a collab. And, you get like preferential deals rather than paying X many. I mean, I've heard some quotes even for Twitter, just absolutely absurd, to be like, on a podcast for like 10 minutes. And I always said no, because it's just not worth it. Like, they'll literally come to you to get a code to play the game or a whitelist. And then, you got them and you can say, well, we'd love to give you a whitelist. What could we do together, right? And there you go. You've got your access.
I'm curious if we could go back a little bit to kind of like the alpha chase or the rotation game. You mentioned, hey, once you're everywhere, then they have to take notice. But I'm curious, how do you overcome that initial problem, especially in Web3, where people are always looking for the new thing? They're looking to maximize gains. They're looking to make it with that next trade.
That's your opportunity. But you have to be very honest with yourself that this is a limited time where it's an extractive society, right? Especially Web3 on Twitter. Like, people are looking for success, right? They're looking for potential profit. And you need to be conscientious that you need to put your best foot forward to show you that your project is the best one, and that, they should be active in that community. But the moment you don't have a free mint or like a hyped mint, you're old news, right? And I've seen projects now everybody knows, but earlier in Web3, people really had a sense of like my community, right? And I already knew, I was like, I think your community only likes you for, the time being, or like the moment the mint occurs. Like the moment the mint occurs, 80% of the people that, you thought were your community will immediately flip you, or like they'll hold for a little bit and try to like see where the floor price hits maximum and then flip you. So that's your opportunity. That opportunity is very limited in time, and you need to like seize all of its value in terms of reach, in terms of positioning, in terms of marketing. I mean, I'm sure you've seen today this company called Portal Coin, right? genius viral marketing, right? It's the same strategy that Memecoin did with the meme coin farming. It's like the more of Friendtech, I believe, did the same. The more you say Portal Coin or Friendtech or meme, you get points, and there's an airdrop at the end. And Blast is doing the same thing, right? Put your money in Blast. There's an airdrop. The airdrop could literally be a photo, of you, Jackal, and they would have fulfilled their promise. You got an airdrop of Jackal. Nobody knows what it is, but the mystery is just such a powerful force in general, especially in Web3. And one of the best things that was told to me starting in Web3 was, it is bearish to launch. You need to be very aware that mystery is one of your greatest strengths. But you cannot stay forever in that phase, right? You need to maximize it. It lasts 2 months, and then that's done. And you yourself, you need to move forward with the next big thing, right? Be it your token airdrop, being your marketplace, being the next NFT that launches, or the game finally, right? But we're all heading to the game, I think, now in Web3 development, right? I think the time of just like NFT dilution is kind of behind us now.
So when you're thinking about go to market for a Web3 game, do you like bump that timeline further up in advance than maybe traditional Web2 games? So kind of where I'm coming from is, you think about, okay, like maybe you see a cinematic a year in advance, then maybe there's like an alpha or beta 6 months in advance. And then you kind of get people engaged through some sort of reward. Hey, you hit this milestone, hit level 10, you can get some sort of unique skin. Like, how do you think about maybe extending live ops in Web3 before that game is launched, before you do the mint, whatever that real like catalyst is?
My take on this is actually pretty contrarian, even in Web3, right? Which is people always ask, like, where's the game? When can I see it? And my answer tends to be, for you to scale a game, Web3 or not Web2, you need to abide by certain marketing rules. And the number one is, you're going to need to be on the biggest distribution channels and press outlets, IGN, Kotaku, GameStop. And in order to do that and work with your PR team, you need to have content that is like untainted, that has never been seen before. All of those, outlets, they're looking for exclusivity. This is an IGN exclusive. This is the first footage of that game, or we got the first playthrough, etc. And so, while you need to start in Web3, it would be a disfavor to games to still cater to an audience that is so small, right? And often, I've forgotten about you already, and present them the whole shebang, and like really try to show them this is how it's played, this is the trailer. I think you need to, go out after you've built that initial push and you've got that momentum, in order to then like reach, max acceptance and mass audience. And those audiences are in the real world. And, once again, like Pudgy Penguin is an awesome example, because, they are not catering to their community to the point where they're revealing everything, right? They reveal, we're in Walmart, this is the new collection, and it's launching here, right? They may have like small teases. They may have, some leaks or information before it's known to the broader public. But you cannot limit yourself to Web3. I think the moment you do that, you'll just never hit the scale to compete with Web2. And Web3 gaming is not a thing. There's no vertical, there's no players, there's barely any money. It's a great place to start. It's a horrible place to end.
So if mindshare is kind of this new currency, and you keep kind of using Luca as an example, which clearly he's done a phenomenal job of that. How do you bank this new currency with games when you want to kind of withhold the actual gameplay, right? When you want to go out and engage people and say, hey, I'm building my brand, right? I've got this great pedigree. Now I'm working on something new. Like, keep tabs on me, pay attention. But
the good thing about Web3 is that you can reactivate really well, right? But you need to have something to activate and reactivate. The problem is when you try to maintain hype at all times, like the overpromise and the deliver, it's the worst way to build, right? But if you're timing your events right, your NFT mint, your token airdrop, your subsequent collections, and if you create great narrative and great marketing campaign where, followers and interactors get something out of it, or the potentially getting something out of it by farming, by providing content, we can really like get something back into the ecosystem, and you can build over time.
Yeah. Is the idea that through a number of different features, such as like we will help host your NFT mint, we will help do your TGE event for the token, is that to help with that initial stage that you mentioned previously on like receiving VC funding, and then the game is ideally going to transition into a fully Web2 or predominantly Web2 style for scale? Or are there any other meaningful features that can kind of be continuously used regardless of where the game is at in terms of scale?
Yeah, I think that's what I meant by reactivation, right? Is when the game is out, you can run reward campaigns that you could not run in Web2. I think Alex said it, like hit level 10 and you're going to get a token reward, for example. You're going to get an airdrop, or the first 100 people get X, or 1,000 get different prizes, right? There is such a thing, especially in Web2 mobile, of climbing the ranks of the top 100 and having your DAU increase rapidly may help you finally get the momentum. Because a lot of things about free-to-play tends to be around momentum, right? Games that have large DAUs tend to maintain that DAU more than games that have smaller ones, especially games that have any sort of multiplayer component, right? And so having those reactivation points where you can dip back into the Web3, crypto Twitter, and provide this like new experience what people are going to chase, right? It is limited in time, but it can really allow you to like kickstart that momentum, right? Getting into the top like 20 on the charts on the free downloads, because everybody's downloading the game at the same time, may allow you to get better featuring from Apple, or just like more visibility from players. And also the algorithm from Apple does track like progression and growth, right? So you may get better placement, and you may get like a bigger shot at acquiring users that are not necessarily going to be pure extractors, but hopefully provide additional like additive value into the ecosystem.
And is it purely financial incentives that enables you to reactivate, on a dime, this community?
Yeah,
or
I mean, in 90% of the time, yes, absolutely. I mean, I would be hard pressed to say that fun is the one thing that those players are chasing, right? And you mentioned we're like in an economy of attention, right? It's absolutely true, right? You're competing with TikTok and YouTube and Netflix and other games, whatnot. But the moment you've got like clear rewards that have potential real world value, or at least like perceived value, like that is the difference between you acquiring a user and not acquiring a user, right? Because suddenly you're going to outcompete with a Netflix, which is just like a passive distraction, while being potentially something that is beneficial to the life of the user.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure.
It was fun.
There we go. The content of this video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. The views shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may hold investments in some of the companies or digital assets featured in the video.